A 10-year-old girl working a mop outside a biker bar at midnight. A man with a tattoo she recognized from a photograph she had carried her whole life. A photograph of a father whose face had been torn away. Her fingertips touched the ink. "That's my dad's," she said. The entire bar went silent. What happened next would take one night to unravel 10 years of lies and bring down something much larger than any of them knew. This is Ren's story. The rain had been falling for 3 hours before anyone noticed the girl. She was outside the bar, working a mop across wet concrete in the dark, her arms too small for the handle, her sneakers soaked through to the skin. A single bulb above the side door cast a yellow circle of light that barely reached her feet. Beyond it, everything was Pennsylvania November cold that didn't ask permission, rain that fell sideways and meant it. Her name was Ren. She was 10 years old. She kept her eyes down. That was the first rule she had learned, the one that stayed consistent across every house, every placement, every new set of rules posted on a refrigerator she wasn't allowed to open without asking. Eyes down, take up less space, don't give anyone a reason. Inside the bar, music thumped against the walls. She could feel it through the soles of her shoes, like a second heartbeat, one that didn't belong to her. Laughter rose and fell in waves. The smell of cigarette smoke and spilled beer drifted under the door every time someone opened it from inside. And each time it opened, she took a small step back, the way you learn to step back from things that might swing toward you. Wade was inside. Wade had been inside for 2.5 hours. She knew because she had counted. She had gotten good at counting things, at time steps, exits, the distance between herself and the nearest door. Counting made the world feel smaller and more manageable even when it wasn't. Wade was her guardian. That was the official word for it. The state had a document that said so. The document had a case number and a signature and the name of a caseworker. Ren had met exactly once a woman named Vera who smelled like lavender and wrote things in a yellow notepad without looking up. The document made it official. Documents made most things official, even when the thing itself was something else entirely. Wade was not a father. He was not even a caretaker in any meaningful sense. He was a man who collected a monthly check and in exchange provided a bed, 2 meals a day, and the minimum required proof of school attendance. What he did not provide was warmth or safety or the basic human understanding that a child left standing in the rain at 11:45 at night was not a child being cared for. But there was no one to report that to. There never was. The mop bucket got kicked over sometime around 11:30. She wasn't entirely sure how it happened. One minute it was upright, the next it was sideways on the entryway floor. Water spreading across the concrete in a slow gray tide, and Wade was standing over it with his beer in one hand and that look on his face. The look that was worse than yelling, because it came before yelling, the way the sky goes that specific color before a storm that tears roofs off. He handed her the mop without a word. He didn't need to speak. She already knew what it meant. She had been cleaning for 40 minutes when voices rose inside. Wade's climbed above the rest in the specific way it climbed when something was going wrong at the card table, a register she recognized the way you recognize weather. She tightened her grip on the mop handle and waited. The door swung open. Wade's hand closed around the back of her collar. "Get in here and clean this up," he said, "before you embarrass me." She walked into the bar. She kept her eyes down. She had taken 4 steps when she stopped. Later, she would not be able to fully explain why. The floor was wet near the bar, and she had started toward it, focused on the job, the way she always focused on jobs, because focus was a kind of armor. But something made her look up, a pull she couldn't name, like a sound just below the range of hearing, or the sensation of being watched by something that wasn't threatening, which was stranger than being watched by something that was. She looked up, and she threw the arm. It was resting on the bar top, turned slightly inward so that the underside of the forearm faced upward. The man it belonged to was large in a way that made the word feel inadequate. He was broad in the way that suggested not just size, but density, the kind of physical presence that rearranges the air around it. His hair was dark gray on the sides, shaved close, swept back on top in a clean undercut. A beard white as deep winter, thick as a closed fist, reached his chest. He wore a vest without a shirt beneath it, black leather covered in patches she couldn't read from where she stood, and both arms from wrist to shoulder were covered in tattoos so dense they looked less like decoration and more like armor grown from the inside out. She was not looking at any of that. She was looking at the tattoo on his forearm. A compass rose its 4 points, precise and deliberate, split through the center by a bolt of lightning. And at the middle of it, where the needle would be the head of a wolf, jaws slightly open, eyes forward rendered in a level of detail that made her chest constrict. She had studied those details so many times in the folded photograph she kept in the front pocket of her hoodie that she could have drawn them from memory in a dark room. Her hand moved before she decided to move it. Her fingertips touched the ink. The words came out before she could stop them. "That's my dad's." The whole bar went quiet, not gradually the way noise usually fades when something shifts. It stopped. The music kept playing for a moment, tinny and hollow without the crowd underneath it, and then someone found the speaker and killed that too. A glass that someone had been setting down touched the bar surface, and the small sound it made was enormous in the silence. The man turned his head. His eyes were pale, the particular gray of winter sky just before snow commits, and they moved across her face with a steadiness that wasn't coldness exactly, but something more deliberate. A man who had learned long ago not to react until he understood. He said very quietly, "What did you say, kid?" Not a question, the beginning of something. She could feel it in the charged air of the room, and every instinct she had developed across years of navigating rooms where she had no power was screaming at her to look down, to take it back, and to say something dismissive and let Wade drag her out the door. She didn't take it back. "That tattoo," she said. Her voice was steadier than she had any right to expect. "It looks like my dad's." Behind the man, something shifted. 3 chairs scraped back simultaneously. 3 men stood in the unhurried way of people who have been in situations before and know there's no need to rush. One was enormous, shaved head, neck, tattooed past the jaw, hands that looked like they'd been built for work that required them to be larger than most people's. One was lean and quiet jaw, working slightly as though calculating. The third had a small, composed smile that didn't belong anywhere near a place like this. The kind of smile that meant decisions were already being made behind it, and he had his phone out before anyone else had moved a deliberate inch. Wade laughed. It came out wrong, too high, too fast. "Kids say things," he said, reaching for her collar again. "We're leaving." The large man from behind stood up slowly. He didn't move fast. He positioned himself between Wade and the exit in a way that made the exit temporarily theoretical. "No," he said. Wade's hand tightened on her collar through the fabric of her hoodie. She felt it in her whole shoulder, a grip that would leave marks that would need explaining. She did not make a sound. The man at the bar did not look at Wade when he spoke next. He looked at where Wade's hand was. "You bring a child in here at midnight," he said, "and you put hands on her like she's cargo." "That's not your business," Wade said. The man's name was stitched above a patch on his vest. Rex. He stood up from the bar stool. Up close, he was taller than she had anticipated. Not aggressive with it, structural, load-bearing. He had the particular stillness of a person who has witnessed enough violence to stop being impressed by the suggestion of it. His hands were large and calloused and hanging at his side open, which was somehow more measured than a fist. "Let her go," Rex said. Wade's chin came up. Or what? The room had become something other than a bar by then. Every person in it had already made a decision and was simply waiting to find out whether it needed to be acted upon. The bartender slid the bolt across the inside of the front door without being asked. The soft, final sound of it took the color out of Wade's face. Rex crouched. He brought himself to eye level with her, which no adult ever did without wanting something. But this was different. He was making himself smaller. He was reducing his own presence deliberately so she wouldn't have to look up at him. "You're not in trouble," he said, and he said it to her, not to the room. "I just need to know where you saw that." Her hands were shaking. She reached into the front pocket of her hoodie and pulled out the photograph. It was folded into quarters, the corners gone soft from handling. She unfolded it with the care she always used. The photograph was the most fragile and most important thing she owned, and she had always treated it accordingly. She held it up. Rex's eyes moved to it and stayed. The photo showed a woman with exhaustion under her eyes and a baby on her hip and a smile that understood it was probably temporary. Beside her stood a man in a dark shirt, his arm around her shoulders. The man's face was gone, torn cleanly away, at the eyes ripped so completely that nothing remained above the jaw. but his forearm was still there, visible between his body and the woman's waist. And on the forearm was a compass rose split by lightning with a wolf head at the center. Below the wolf, a small number. 11. Rex looked at the photograph for a long time. Behind him, a sound moved through the bar. Not words. A breath shared and sharp, the sound a room makes when it has understood something that most of its occupants hadn't known they were going to understand tonight. Rex looked at his own forearm. He reached across slowly with his right hand and pushed his left sleeve up past the elbow. He turned his arm so the underside faced upward. Under the compass, rose. Under the wolf head, in the space where the tattoo's lines curved into a dense border of knotwork, almost invisible, unless you were specifically searching for it, was a single word in small capital letters pressed into the skin. Anchor. She looked at it. The shape matched the shape in the photograph, the way two halves of the same torn page match each other. Not similar, not close, identical. "That's it," she said. Her voice was barely audible. "That's what she called it." Behind Rex, the enormous man, who she would later learn was called Brick, let out one short syllable. Not quite a word, not quite anything she had language for. Rex said nothing for a moment. His expression had done something she hadn't seen an adult's face do before, not in relation to her. It had gone very still in the precise way that meant it was working hard to remain that way. "Your mom told you about this tattoo," he said. "She said it was his. She said he had a word underneath it that only people who really knew him were allowed to say." She paused. "She said the compass always points home." Rex stood up. He turned to face Wade. Wade had gone pale differently than before. This was a different kind of pale, the kind that comes with recognition rather than fear. He knew something. She could see it now, the way you see things in people's faces once you've been trained by necessity to read them. "You're going to give me her caseworker's name," Rex said, "and the placement file." "I don't have to give you anything," Wade said. "She's my ward. I'll call the police." The man with a composed smile raised his phone without looking at Wade. "Call them," he said pleasantly. "I'll send your probation officer this photograph first." A pause. "And the one from March." Wade's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Rex looked down at Ren again. He looked at the photograph, then at the name on the file folder Brick had already extracted from Wade's jacket pocket, quick and quiet, accomplished before Wade had registered it was happening. "Can I look at it?" Rex asked, nodding toward the photograph. She hesitated. Every instinct she had built across years in the system told her to hold on to it. The photograph was the only thing she owned that was entirely hers. He saw the hesitation. He did not reach for it. "I won't take it," he said. "I just want to see." She handed it to him. He held it the way you hold something that could fall apart gently with awareness of its edges. He studied the forearm in the photograph, the tattoo, the number below it. Then he looked at his own forearm, then back. He folded it along her creases precisely and returned it. "Get your shoes," he said. "Whatever else you have. 5 minutes." She stared at him. "Where are we going?" she said. His pale eyes held hers without performance. "Somewhere you don't have to flinch," he said. She thought about that word. She hadn't known other people could see it. She went and got her shoes. The rain was still falling when they walked out. Rex moved on her left, angling his body between her and the parking lot without making a show of it. Brick was 3 steps behind, shoulders wide, eyes moving across the dark spaces in the reflections of headlights in standing water. The man with the composed smile, whose name she still didn't have, stayed back. A pickup truck sat near the end of the lot, old built to outlast several theories about how long trucks should last. Rex opened the passenger door for her. She paused with her hand on the frame. She had been in cars with adults before. Cars were unpredictable in the way enclosed spaces with people who held all the power were always unpredictable. But Rex wasn't smiling. He wasn't making promises. He was standing with the door open, waiting, and she understood the specific difference between someone performing kindness and someone simply doing it. She got in. He shut the door, walked around, and started the engine. Brick arranged himself in the back seat with the stoic determination of a large man making peace with inadequate space. The truck pulled out, and she looked back through the fogged rear window. Wade's face was pressed against the bar glass, white, in furious hands flat on either side of the frame. One of the Iron Wolves was crouched beside him, saying something he appeared to be refusing to hear. She watched until the parking lot was gone. The drive was 6 minutes. Rain blurred the streetlights into long gold streaks. They turned off a main road down a back lane, through a gate into a fenced lot behind a low building with a metal sign, Iron Wolves Auto and Tow. It did not look like a clubhouse. It looked like work grease and long hours and the specific exhaustion that comes from doing something real rather than performing it. Rex pulled under an awning and killed the engine. He sat for a moment listening to something she couldn't identify. "You hungry?" he said, her stomach clenched. She had learned years ago not to answer that honestly. Hunger was something you managed privately, not something you expressed. Expressing it required hope, and hope, in most of the places she'd been placed, was a liability. "I'm fine," she said. From the back seat, Brick made a sound somewhere between recognition and amusement. "Kid," he said, "you look like you'd eat the upholstery." She stared at her hands. Inside the building, heat reached her face before anything else. The smell was coffee and motor oil layered over something warmer, an animal underneath. A dog came around from behind the counter, old one ear bent at a permanent angle that implied a story nobody had recorded. Eyes bright and careful. The dog sniffed her sneakers and then leaned its full weight against her shin. She did not know why that made her throat tighten. A woman appeared from the back of the shop. Hair knotted up a rag in her hand, the kind of face that carried more history than it discussed. She looked at Ren, then at Rex, then back at Ren, specifically at the place where Ren's sleeve had ridden up enough to show the edge of bruising above her wrist. "What did you bring home?" the woman said. "Delia," Rex said. "That is not a stray dog, Rex." "No," Rex said. "It's a kid." Delia's jaw set. Her expression moved through something complicated and arrived at a controlled anger, the kind that has decided to be useful rather than loud. "Kitchen," she said, not a request. "Sit her." 10 minutes later, a bowl of soup was in front of Ren, real soup with actual vegetables, a piece of bread beside it, and a glass of water with ice. Delia sat across the table, not performing concern, just present and watchful in a way that had no agenda attached to it. Ren stared at the bowl. "Eat," Delia said. She took a spoonful. Her eyes stung, and she despised it the way her body betrayed her every time something was offered without a cost attached. She forced herself to eat slowly. The soup was warm all the way down, and the dog, whose name she would learn was Juniper, settled under her chair like it was where she had always been. Rex stood at the counter, phone to his ear, voice low. She could catch pieces without trying. Someone asking whether they'd gotten her talking. Rex saying he wasn't interrogating a child, he was trying to understand what she'd walked out of. Something about the placement records. Something about Whitfield. He ended the call and spread documents across the counter. Placement records. Case numbers. Transfer paperwork. Brick leaned over. Delia came from the table to look. Juniper stayed with Ren, unmoved by the shift in the room's gravity. 3 months ago, Rex said, pressing one finger to a line. Moved from Whitfield Youth Services. Delia frowned. Never heard of it. Because it doesn't exist correctly. Brick turned a page. Address on the paperwork doesn't match any business registry. Phone number routes to a deadline. The caseworker, Vera Holt, her license number is 1 digit off from a real worker licensed in the next county. Someone built a false trail, Rex said, quietly, but the air around the words was not quiet at all. Ren watched them look at documents the way adults look at documents when paper has stopped being paper and become something else, a wound or a weapon. Rex came and crouched near the table. Ren, he said, did you actually go to Whitfield? She nodded slowly. For a while, she said. They moved me there after the hospital. He waited. He was good at waiting without filling the space. She looked down. She hadn't meant to say that part. What hospital? Delia said from across the room. Careful the way someone is careful when they're selecting their steps on uncertain ground. I got sick, Ren said. Rex didn't press it. He watched her face with a patience she wasn't accustomed to, the kind that doesn't compensate for silence with noise. Tell me about Whitfield, he said, what it was like. She tried to remember without letting the remembering take over. It was quiet, she said. Not like a house, more like a series of rooms. They didn't call you by name. Brick's shoulders changed. What did they call you? Rex said. She looked at the table. My number, she said. They said it was easier. Delia's hands resting on the counter became fists. What number? Rex said. Her lips barely moved. 11, she said. The room went still in a way that was different from the bar. That had been a crowd catching its collective breath. This was three adults who had each been assembling a picture, and the picture had just become something they hadn't wanted it to be. Brick looked at Rex, not at the folder, at Rex's forearm. Rex was already looking. Below the wolf head on his tattoo nestled in the knotwork, the number was there. Small, deliberate, 11. Wren looked at the tattoo. She looked at the photograph she'd returned to her pocket, where the same number sat below the same wolf head on a man whose face had been torn away. They told me not to say it outside, she said. They said if I did, I'd be moved somewhere worse. Who told you that? Delia said. Her voice had gone to something very low. Vera, the caseworker. Rex stood. He walked back to the counter and looked at the folder and then passed it at something only he could see. His face was doing the thing she had learned to identify the moment when information connects to other information a person has been carrying, and the connection changes what both pieces mean. He turned toward her. The number isn't random, he said. Your father used 11 as an identifier when he was doing work that needed to stay off any official record. He paused, deciding how much truth to extend, and decided to extend more than he might have otherwise. Someone inside that system knew exactly who your father was. They didn't place you in Whitfield by accident. They put you there so that eventually the right person would find you. She absorbed that. 10 years old, and she had spent enough time in rooms where adults made decisions about her without her present that she had developed an unusual capacity for receiving difficult information. It didn't make the information smaller. It just made it something she could hold without it crushing her. Wade, she said. Rex nodded once. Wade was paid to take you. He knew where to bring you tonight. He knew I'd be here. He knew what would happen when you walked through that door. He watched her face. What are you thinking? She thought about the card game. Wade losing more than usual. The mop bucket going over at exactly the right moment. The way he'd shoved her through the door with a certainty that wasn't quite the same as his ordinary carelessness. It had direction to it. Intent. She had been in rooms before where she was the only person who didn't know what was happening. She hadn't recognized she was in one again until just now. I'm thinking, she said slowly, that tonight wasn't an accident either. Rex looked at her for a moment. He looked the way people look when a child says something that confirms what they hope the child would eventually understand, Sean. No, he said, it wasn't. His phone buzzed on the counter, once, a second time, a third rapid. He picked it up and looked at the screen. Whatever was there changed something in his face, not dramatically, but measurably. A recalibration. The expression of a man who has been in enough deteriorating situations to recognize when one has just changed its nature. Brick pushed off the wall. What? Rex turned the phone so Brick and Delia could see. 3 messages from an unknown number. The first, we know where you are. The second, hand the girl over. The third, which had arrived while he was reading the first 2, or we come in loud. Rex raised his eyes slowly to the front windows. Through rain-streaked glass, headlights swung across the lot. One set, then another, then a third coming in from the far side of the fence line, low and deliberate, the movement of vehicles positioning rather than arriving. The power went out. All of it all at once, as though something fundamental had been extracted from the building. The fluorescent shop lights, the desk lamp in the office, the computer monitor's glow, the small red standby light on the coffee maker. Gone. Darkness came down like a decision. In the first second of it, Wren heard a sound she recognized without knowing how she recognized it. The front lock being tested. Slow. Careful. The sound of someone who had done this before and knew there was no reason to rush. Juniper's growl started deep in her chest and moved outward into the dark like a warning the building was issuing on its own behalf. Delia's voice came from somewhere to Wren's left level and steady. Office, top drawer, flashlight. Rex said nothing. Wren felt rather than saw him moving, felt the shift in the air his body made as he positioned himself between her and the front of the shop. His hand found her shoulder in the dark. Not gripping. Guiding. Wren, he said quietly, come with me. Don't run. Don't make noise. Just stay with me. She nodded. She didn't know if he could see it. She stayed with him. The dark made the familiar space uncertain. She kept her focus on the sound of Rex's boots on the concrete and the warmth of the hand that had moved from her shoulder to a light hold on her wrist, not squeezing, not owning the grip of someone making sure they don't lose her. Brick's voice came from near the front. Two at the entrance, one working along the left wall. How can you tell? Delia whispered. I can hear them breathing. They reached the office, the door closed behind them. Rex found the flashlight in the top drawer by touch without light, which meant he had located it before and had thought about needing to find it this way. The beam came on white and narrow, and he set it on the desk angled toward the door, not toward her. She stood in the small room and listened to the front lock being tested a second time, then a third. Then from outside a voice not shouting. The voice of a man who has decided the situation is already controlled and is simply waiting for the other side to accept that conclusion. Rex, the voice said, I know you're in there. Don't make this difficult. Rex said nothing. Ren looked at his face in the edge of the flashlight's spill. His jaw was set. He was watching the angle of reflected light off the window glass, using it to see outside without exposing his face to the frame. His expression was the expression of a man doing difficult arithmetic. She had the photograph in her pocket. She had always had it in her pocket. For the first time since she'd walked into this night, she understood that the photograph had never been only hers. It was something other people needed, had been working toward, had structured years of effort around. She had been carrying it without knowing what she was carrying, the way you carry a key without knowing there's a door. The voice came again closer now. We don't want trouble. We want the girl. Hand her over, and this is over. Rex turned his head and looked at her. In the narrow white light of the flashlight, with the rain working at the roof and boots moving in gravel outside, he looked at her with the expression of a man who has made a decision and wants the other person to understand they were part of it. Whatever you hear, he said, you stay behind me. She held his gaze. Okay, she said. She meant it in a way she hadn't meant anything in a long time, because there had never been anyone standing in front of her who she actually believed was going to stay there. Outside, a drill began to whine against the front lock. The night had officially become something else. The drill did not stop. It rose in pitch and then found its working register, steady, mechanical, patient, in the way of a tool operated by someone who understood that urgency and effectiveness were not the same thing. They had already decided the outcome. They were simply doing the work of arriving at it. Rex moved without looking at her. He crossed the office to the window and angled the flashlight beam, low, bouncing it off the glass in a way that gave him a reflection of the parking lot without putting his own face in the light. Ren stayed near the desk. Juniper had followed them in and was pressed against her calf, warm and solid, and completely certain about where she needed to be. Delia appeared in the office doorway, pale in the spillover of the flashlight beam, but her voice was unshaken. Back exit is clear for now, she said. I have the keys. Brick's voice came from the front of the shop, measured and low. They've got the fence line covered. Someone on the far side of the lot watching the gate. Rex looked at the back wall of the office. His eyes settled on a low metal cabinet pushed flush against the drywall. Behind that, he said to Ren, there's a panel. It opens into a crawl space, goes through to the service bay. He paused. If I tell you to go, you go all the way through. You don't stop and you don't look back. She looked at the cabinet, then at him. What about you, she said. He didn't answer that directly. You keep moving, he said. She understood what that meant. She didn't like it. The drill went silent. In the sudden absence of it, the rain against the metal roof became very loud. Then the front lock gave. The sound was a single, definitive clank metal, separating cleanly from metal, and then the front door of the shop opened with the kind of force that isn't quite violence but is designed to feel adjacent to it. The bang of it against the interior wall shook something loose from the ceiling. Voices came in with the cold air. At least two men moving with the coordinated certainty of people who had entered other buildings on other nights and knew the geometry of it. Rex was out of the office before she had drawn her next breath. She heard Brick's voice through the wall, low and solid, saying wrong door, in a tone suggesting he was not particularly alarmed. She heard the crash of something metal meeting something else, a grunt of impact. She stayed by the cabinet with one hand flat against its cold steel surface. The back door of the service bay opened. Delia came through it from the outside, having circled the building. Her hair was down now and rain-soaked, and she moved with the committed speed of someone who has made a decision and has no intention of revisiting it. She took Ren by the arm, not rough but without hesitation, and pulled her toward the back exit. Outside, the rain was cold needles against Ren's face. The lot behind the building was narrow, fenced tight on both sides, a single lane running toward the street. Delia moved toward the side gate without pause. Then the headlights came on. A vehicle had rolled into the alley from the street end. Quiet engine, new tires on wet asphalt. It sat with lights at low beam blocking the only way out, and the driver's door opened and a man stepped into the rain. He walked the way certain men walk when they want to communicate that everything is already settled. Hands slightly away from his body, showing nothing in them, a gesture engineered to look reasonable and producing instead something that felt like its opposite. He was in his 50s, dressed well for the time and place, wearing a coat that shed rain cleanly. He carried an umbrella he hadn't opened. He said Delia's name the way you call across a yard to a neighbor. "Don't do this," he said. "I don't know you," Delia said. She had positioned herself between the man and Ren without making a production of it. "You know of me." His eyes moved past Delia and found Ren with a directness that tightened her skin. "There she is," he said softly. 11. Ren did not move. Something inside her went very still and very cold, and from that cold place she said in a voice that did not waver, "That's not my name." The man tilted his head. The composed smile didn't change. "It's what the paperwork says," he said. "It's what you've been since Whitfield. A file number, a loose end that wants managing." He took one step forward. "Give her to me. I'll make sure she's placed somewhere real. An actual family. A clean record. She starts fresh." Delia stepped backward, pulling Ren with her. "You're not taking her," Delia said. The man exhaled in the specific way of someone who has decided they're dealing with emotion rather than reason. "I know Rex is stubborn," he said. "He always was, but he's not doing this child any good." "You know Rex," Delia said. "I know the tattoo," the man said. Ren went cold all the way to her feet. He lifted his sleeve slightly to show bare forearm, no compass, no wolf, no ink of any kind. But the way he said it meant he didn't need the tattoo to understand its significance or its origin. A dead man's reputation has been walking around in the form of a rumor for too long, the man said, his voice dropping half a register. And now this child walks into a bar and says the quiet part out loud. That becomes a problem requiring management. Delia's voice sharpened. "What do you want?" The man's eyes didn't leave Ren. "Her," he said, "and the photograph." Ren's hand went to her pocket before she'd consciously decided to move it. The man noticed. His smile adjusted in a way that changed his face. "She still has it," he said. Delia pulled Ren back toward the building. The man's voice stayed even behind them. "If you run," he said, "you'll encounter the people I came with. They're already inside with Rex." He paused. "Hand her over, or I make one call and this entire club goes down for kidnapping and endangering a minor. You think the system won't listen to that story? I don't just work within the system." He let that hang. "I am the system." Delia went still. Ren heard it, the small catch in her breathing, the first hesitation all night, and understood it. Because that particular threat wasn't something you could fight with your hands. Paperwork, legal language, official concern deployed as a weapon. These were things that had always worked on people like her and people like Delia. Then the back door of the building burst open behind them. Rex came through it like weather that had been given a specific shape. Knuckles scraped, wet through, breathing hard but controlled. He looked at the man in the alley, and the man raised both hands in that same theatrical gesture of reasonableness, and Rex said, "Who are you, Turing?" in a voice like gravel at the bottom of something deep. The man's smile widened. "You've seen me before. Think carefully." Rex studied the man's face. Something moved in his expression, not recognition of this specific man, but of the category, the type. He had seen this particular face attached to other names in other situations that had also been described as management, as administration, as the necessary correction of unwanted variables. The man decided to help him along. He nodded toward Ren. "That child didn't recognize your tattoo because you're her father," he said. "She recognized it because it was the last thing her father saw before we put him in the ground." Rex took one step forward, and Delia went wrong. The sound that preceded it was almost nothing, a compressed snap tight and muted the sound a door makes when it latches in a very small room. Delia's body jerked sideways against Ren, all her solidity and certainty going momentarily absent, and her keys struck the wet concrete with a bright, meaningless clatter. Wren didn't understand it for one full second. Then she did. Rex crossed the space between himself and Wren in a straight line, no curve, no hesitation. He pulled her away from Delia's falling weight and put his body between Wren and the direction the sound had come from. Above them, on an elevated position, a shooter who had been patient enough to wait for the precise moment. Delia was on her side on the ground, eyes open, rain moving across her face in sheets. She was making a sound small, broken, the sound that meant she was still present, even if she was no longer in full control of the machinery of her own body. Wren tried to go to her. Rex caught the back of her hoodie. "Wren, no." His voice was controlled and urgent at once. "If you move out there, you die." "We can help her," Wren said, a second suppressed shot. A spark leapt off the gatepost 6 inches from Rex's shoulder, and he dropped low, pulling Wren with him. Her palms hit wet concrete, her knees followed, and she bit the inside of her cheek hard enough to taste blood. Brick was crouched near the building's back wall, reading the angles. "We move toward her, we're exposed. We move away, she's alone." They set the geometry. The man with the umbrella looked down at Delia with the expression of someone regarding a minor inconvenience that has been managed. "She should have stayed out of it," he said. "This has nothing to do with her." Rex's hands were pressed flat against the concrete. His jaw was tight enough that the muscles along it stood visible even in the dark. He looked like a man who wanted to cross that alley more than he wanted almost anything, and was preventing himself through the application of everything he had. The man's voice came again, patient as the rain. "The photograph. Put it on the ground. Step back. The girl comes with me, and my medic sees to her." He waited. "Or you continue making decisions while she bleeds out." Rex said nothing for a long moment. Then he looked at Brick. Brick had his hand behind him, against the wall fingers, on the edge of the back door, holding it there, waiting. Rex's voice dropped to almost nothing. "You're not leaving with her." "This isn't negotiation, Rex." The man's patience had the quality of something engineered rather than natural. "This is me offering you the least harmful option available." Rex raised his voice slightly, building something deliberate out of it. "You killed the power, jammed the signal. You brought suppressed weapons, a positioned shooter. You're not concerned about law enforcement." The man said nothing. "Because you are law enforcement," Rex said, "or something that learned to dress like it." The silence that followed had a shape. Rex's eyes moved to Brick. One deliberate blink. Brick slammed the back door open and immediately yanked it shut again, hard as though he'd made an error. The man's attention snapped to the door reflexively, half a second, and Rex tore into the front pocket of Wren's hoodie and pulled the photograph out and threw it high into the air above the alley, spinning end over end high enough to hang for a moment. Wren heard herself make a sound. The shot came. It caught the photograph at the top of its arc and shredded it, wet pieces scattering across the alley like confetti in the rain. But the shot gave up the position. A faint muzzle signature reflected off a rooftop vent on the far side of the fence line. Geometry in seconds. Brick was already at the fence. He hit the chain link at full momentum and went up it the way something very large and absolutely committed goes up a vertical surface, not gracefully, but without any doubt about where it was going. He cleared the top and dropped into the dark above. The man's head snapped up. "Stop him!" Rex grabbed Wren by the arm and hauled her backward through the door. She stumbled, nearly went down, caught the frame. She looked back before the door closed. Delia was still on the concrete. Her eyes were still open. Her chest was still moving. The door shut. Inside the service bay, the emergency light above the far exit burned dim red. Wren's eyes adjusted in the seconds Rex was already in motion, pushing her toward the office corridor. She ran, hit the office door, and yanked it open and went inside. And the flashlight was still where Rex had left it on the desk, its beam cutting a white line across the floor. She turned. She was looking for the cabinet, the panel, the crawl space, and she saw something else. Under the desk, tucked into the shadow beneath the lower frame, a device smaller than her fist, black with a green light blinking from it, steady and patient, and absolutely not new. She crouched and picked it up. It was warm in a way that wasn't ambient, not the warmth of something left in a heated room, the warmth of something with active components that had been running. Someone had placed it here before they arrived. Hours before. They hadn't been discovered tonight. They had been directed here. The full weight of that landed before she could think her way around it. Wade had known where to bring her. The Ironside bar, Rex specifically. This specific night. And whoever had paid Wade had known where Rex would take her afterward because they had already been inside this building earlier in the day preparing. For the implication could fully expand. The back door at the far end of the shop shuddered with a heavy impact. Once. Twice. She threw the tracker. It skittered across the floor and came to rest under the filing cabinet, its green light blinking in the shadow. The office window exploded inward. Glass came across the floor in a spray, and a gloved hand reached through the broken frame, fingers searching for the latch, sliding on wet shards. A voice came with it, close enough to feel almost conversational. 11, the voice said. Don't make me come in after you. She backed against the desk. Her knees hit its edge. She grabbed the flashlight and aimed the beam directly at the reaching hand. The fingers paused. Then they found the latch, and the window frame shifted, and a face came partway through hood. Up jaw. Visible eyes belonging to someone who had stopped sleeping consistent hours some time ago. Hey, the man said softly. The softness was worse than any alternative. There you are. The office door slammed inward from behind her simultaneously, both at once, window and door, and she understood what the coordination meant. They had taken time to box the room. They had already decided how this went. She pressed her back against the far wall. My name is Wren, she said. Not on the paperwork, the man said. The office door came apart. Rex came through it the way a wall comes apart when something structural has failed fast and total, with a tire iron in one hand. He swung it at the intruder's head before the man had registered he was there. The man ducked just enough that the iron clipped his hood and hit the window frame with a sound like a struck bell. Rex stepped into the space between the intruder and Wren, making himself the room's new geography. Get away from her, Rex said. The intruder recovered. He smiled, not the right expression for someone who had just nearly been hit with a tire iron, but the expression of someone who had anticipated exactly this development. He reached inside his jacket and produced a badge. Federal Task Force, he said quickly. You hit me again, and you're finished. Rex hit him again. The tire iron caught the man's ribs, and his breath left him in a hard bark, and he bent at the middle, and Rex leaned down close. You don't get to hunt a child through the dark and then show me a badge, Rex said. From somewhere above, through the ceiling, through the metal roof, through the rain, Brick's voice came down like distant thunder. Rex's name. Then a shot not suppressed this time. Real loud, directionally specific. Then a different kind of silence that meant something had been resolved up there. The intruder's eyes went to the ceiling. Rex drove his shoulder into the man's chest and took him back against the desk. Papers went everywhere. The flashlight hit the floor, and its beam began turning slow circles across the walls. Rex pinned the man down with his forearm across the chest. Where is Ghost? Rex said. The man looked up at him, half pain, half satisfaction, that had no right to exist on his face. If you're asking, he said, you're already behind. Rex's grip tightened. Answer. You want the truth. The man's breathing was ragged, but his eyes were still working. The tattoo was never a memorial. It's a label, and so is 11. Rex went very still. Wren was on the floor near the filing cabinet, fingers on its edge, pulling at it. It was jammed heavier than it should have been, as though something was pressing from the other side. She reached into the gap along the bottom edge and touched something cold and wet. She pulled her hand back and looked at her palm in the rotating beam of the flashlight. Red, fresh. From the service bay came a deep crash, something heavy and metallic folding under sudden impact. Then Brick's voice, no longer from above, but from close tight, was something that was not quite alarm, but was its closest neighbor. Rex, get down. Rex looked up from the intruder. The man on the desk smiled in a specific way, the smile of someone who has been waiting for a particular development and is watching it arrive on schedule. The wall behind Wren, behind the jammed cabinet, pushed inward. Once. Twice. On the third impact, a section of drywall gave way, plaster dust coming down like a white curtain, and a hand came through the gap. Reaching, fingers closing on the cabinet's edge and pulling. The cabinet began to move. Its feet screamed across the concrete. A voice came from inside the wall from the dark space behind the plaster. Low and rough, and it landed in Ren's chest in the specific way that things land when they are entirely unknown and somehow entirely familiar at the same time. "Bring the girl to me," it said. Rex spun toward the gap, tire iron raised. The intruder tried to use the moment, and Rex put an elbow into his throat without looking, keeping him down by reflexes full attention on what was emerging. The cabinet slid another inch. Another. The figure came through, crawling from darkness into the rotating white light of the fallen flashlight. He pulled himself through with both arms and stood. He was not large. He had been built for larger once. There was the skeletal suggestion of a frame that had been engineered to carry weight and had been given nothing to carry for a very long time. His clothes were wet through and torn at the knees. His hands on the floor as he stood showed restraint marks on the wrists older than the intruder's, more permanent, the kind that have had long enough to become structural. He straightened. He looked at Rex first. His face was in the edge of the rotating light, and Ren could only see parts of it, the angle of the jaw, the set of the mouth, the particular divot in the lower lip from a scar she had been told about. Her mother had described it in the way she described things that mattered in the hours between midnight and morning when neither of them could sleep. "Your dad fell off his bike when he was 9 years old. He cried about the bike, not the scar. That's how you know what kind of person someone is." Ren's throat closed. The man looked at Rex and said, "You're in my way." Rex did not move. "You tell me how you know my name." The man's eyes went to Rex's forearm, to the tattoo, to the word inside the knotwork. "Same way you know mine," he said. Rex went still in the way of a person absorbing something personal rather than physical. The man lifted his own sleeve. Nothing. Then he pulled the collar of his shirt down to expose the skin of his upper arm. A faint outline there, not a cover-up, not a tattoo hidden beneath another. Something removed, burned out. The ghost of a shape that had been a compass rose. Ren's lungs stopped working correctly. They made sure of that. The man said, his voice changing register, something rougher coming up through it like something traveling through damaged ground. "The tattoo isn't on me anymore." Rex said the name barely above a breath. "Ghost." Ren pressed her face against the cold steel of the filing cabinet. She was 10 years old, and she had been maintaining herself through this night through the mechanism of focus, and focus was approaching its limit. Ghost looked at Rex for another moment. Then he looked past him. He looked at Ren. He looked at her the way a person looks at something they have been trying to reach for a long time and cannot yet fully believe they have reached. Something in his face pulled in two directions, the hardness against something else, and the something else stopped losing. "Go toward the door," the intruder on the desk said, finding breath. "Now is your moment." Rex drove the tire iron into the desk surface 2 inches from the man's ear. The impact in the small room was enormous. The man stopped talking. Ghost took one step toward Ren. Rex pivoted tire iron up. "Don't," Rex said. Ghost stopped. He looked at the iron, at Rex. He looked like a man who has grown tired of being stopped by things he should be able to walk through. "You're still in my way," Ghost said. "Then tell me what this is," Rex said. "First." Ghost's jaw worked. "Cleanup operation," he said. "Someone made a mistake leaving that number attached to her in any documented form. 11 is a key. Anyone who knows what it unlocks will eventually come for whoever's carrying it." "Why does the key need to be a child?" Rex said. Ghost looked at Ren. He didn't answer that with words. He answered it with his face, and his face said something about having asked himself the same question for years, in conditions that did not allow for satisfactory answers. Ren stepped out from behind the Rex. Rex reached for her arm. She moved past his hand. She stood 3 feet from Ghost, and she looked up at him in the rotating white light, and she said, "You're my dad." The room held itself. The intruder was silent. Rex was silent. Even the rain seemed to pause. Ghost looked at her. He searched her face the way you search for something you thought you remembered accurately and are afraid you haven't. His hands were at his sides and shaking in a way he was working hard to manage. "What's your mom's name?" he said. His voice was barely its own voice. "Marlene," Ren said. Something broke in his face. Not completely. Just a fracture line running through it, the kind that tells you the whole structure was being held together by will alone, And the will has just been asked to do one thing too many. I tried to come to you, Ghost said. I need you to know that. Then why didn't you, she said. His eyes moved to the intruder, then back to her. Because every time I got close, they put you in front of me to stop me. You are the only thing they have over me. You've always been the only thing. Ren looked at the intruder's phone still visible in the debris on the desk. Rex had pinned the man, and the phone had slid partially free of his jacket pocket. The screen was still lit. She moved toward it. Rex didn't stop her this time. She picked it up. The screen showed a message thread, and in the thread above the recent operational texts, older messages. She scrolled up. The contact name at the top of the chain was not the intruder's name. It was a name she knew. Her mother's name, Marlene. The messages were months old. They were not written in the language of someone who had been coerced. They were written in the language of someone making a deliberate transaction, offering information, a location, a set of coordinates in exchange for something. She read the words and had to read them again because the first reading didn't fully arrive. On the second reading, it arrived completely. Her mother had known where Ghost was. She had given that information to the man outside Harlan Cole voluntarily, with terms attached in exchange for a guarantee that Ren would be placed in a safe, legitimate foster home. Marlene had traded Ghost to save her daughter, and had no way of knowing that the placement she'd been promised was controlled by the same man she'd made the deal with. Ren set the phone down on the desk. She looked at Ghost. Ghost had seen her face change. He knew she had read something. And then the beeping started. Rex moved toward the cabinet, and Ghost's hand shot out and grabbed the cabinet's edge. Don't move it, Ghost said. What is this? Rex said. Not mine. The people who set this up, they put a pressure switch underneath. The cabinet's weight is holding it depressed. You move the cabinet, the contact opens. Ghost's voice was flat and fast. I came in from the old transit tunnel that runs under this building. Iron Wolves Auto was one of our logistics points 3 years ago. I knew the crawl space. I found the device when I came through. I've been holding the secondary contact on the pressure plate from this side. Rex stared at him. How long? Long enough that my arms are not doing well, Ghost said. Rex went for the duct tape on the shelf behind the desk. He tore long strips with the efficiency of someone who has improvised structural solutions under pressure before. When I say Rex told Ghost, keep the pressure exactly where it is. I'm going to anchor your hands. You just hold. That's the job. Ghost's eyes went to Ren, then back to Rex. Something moved through him, the specific quality of a decision being made about trust, when trust has not been available for a very long time, and the available alternative is worse. If you tape my hands, Ghost said, I can't get her out if something goes wrong. Nothing goes wrong if you hold, Rex said. Hold. He wrapped the tape around Ghost's wrists and the cabinet edge and the wall frame fast and layered and tight, building tension into each pass. Ghost's face contracted as the tape pulled against old scar tissue, but he made no sound, and his grip did not change. Rex crouched at the base of the cabinet. He could see a wire now nearly invisible running from underneath to the tracker under the filing cabinet. Cut the wire, the intruder said. He had found enough breath to have opinions again. That disarms it, Ghost said without moving. He's lying. He's not lying about the wire, the intruder said. He's lying about what cutting it accomplishes. Silence except for the rain and the beeping, which was nearly continuous now. Rex looked at Ghost. How do I disarm it? There should be a magnetic clamp in the toolkit I stashed in the crawl space when I came through, Ghost said. Industrial magnet. You hold it against the switch housing, it keeps the contact closed without needing the mechanical pressure. The intruder said with the specificity of someone who does not want to die in a room he didn't intend to be in. That's actually correct. Rex looked at him. That was not the plan I agreed to, the man said. I agreed to an extraction, not to being taped to furniture next to an active device. Rex looked at Ghost. Can you reach into the gap without losing the contact? Ghost's forearm was trembling. Possibly. Rex taped the knuckles tighter, locked the fingers to the frame as fully as the tape allowed. Ghost went white around the edges of his face, but his grip held. Rex crouched next to Ren, who had her hands over her ears. Don't move, he said. Whatever happens. She nodded. Ghost extended his free hand slowly into the gap behind the broken drywall, feeling along a surface he couldn't see. His taped arm trembled with maintained pressure. The beeping was almost a single sustained tone. His fingers found something. He pulled. A small tool roll, dark cloth slightly damp from the crawlspace. Rex grabbed it and tore it open. Inside were small tools and at the center, a heavy rectangular magnet the size of a matchbox. Rex crouched at the base of the cabinet. The switch housing was visible now, a small metal plate wired to the tracker recessed under the cabinet's foot. He slid the magnet toward it with the precision of someone performing a delicate operation in conditions that made precision very difficult. The magnet made contact. The beeping stopped. The silence that came down in its place was so complete that the rain against the roof sounded like something generous. The red light turned green. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Rex stood. We have seconds before they know it's dead. Ghost's eyes widened. They'll come in anyway. Yes, Rex said. Let them. Rex pulled the intruder up by the collar and secured his wrist to the chair with what remained of the tape. The man protested. Rex did not engage with the protest. You're staying here, Rex said. Your bait and your evidence in that order. The intruder's composure cracked. You can't leave me in here. Rex moved to untape Ghost's hands carefully without shifting the magnet's position. Don't touch the cabinet, he said. The magnet is holding, but it's not built for movement. Ghost straightened. His wrists were torn where the tape had pulled against scar tissue. He looked at them with the expression of a man who has decided that pain is not currently relevant information. Then from the dark of the shop outside the office, a new voice came. Smooth, patient, calm in the way of something that has been specifically constructed rather than naturally achieved. Rex, a pause. Power comes back in 30 seconds. When it does, I have the cameras again. I'd like you to think about what those cameras are going to record. Ghost looked at the ceiling, at Rex. Rex looked at Ren. Then the voice shifted softer, more deliberate, aimed. I'll trade the girl for the woman in the alley. She's still breathing, barely but breathing. She can be helped or she cannot be helped. That's yours to decide. Tick-tock, Rex. Ren's chest seized. She thought of Delia on the wet concrete, the sound she had been making. Eyes open, chest moving, rain across her face. Rex stood absolutely still in the middle of the broken office tire iron in one hand, the specific expression of a man doing arithmetic at a scale most people never reach. Ghost said, barely audible, not meant to carry outside the room. It's a hook. You hand her over, they take both. Rex looked at him. They don't deliver on what they offer, Ghost said. That is the single most consistent thing about them. Rex looked at Ren, and Ren didn't wait for him to decide for her. She fed me, Ren said. Her voice was quiet and it had no hesitation in it at all. We don't leave her. Rex held her gaze for 1 second, just one. Then a taser fired somewhere in the outer shop. The sound was brief and high, a crack of electricity, and then Rex's voice came through the wall, wrong the voice of someone whose voluntary muscular control has been temporarily taken off the table. Ghost's eyes went to the doorway. A man stepped into the office with a shotgun leveled and the expression of someone who has decided not to feel what they're about to do. He looked at Ren. Walk, he said. Ren backed up 1 step. Ghost said from behind the cabinet, still anchored, still unable to move without releasing the contact, don't touch her. The shotgun man didn't look at Ghost. He looked at Ren the way people look at something they are calculating the weight of. Ren looked at the gap in the wall where Ghost's fingers were still pressed against the switch housing the magnet doing its patient work. She looked at the broken window. She looked at Ghost. He read her face. No, Ghost said. She ran. She hit the broken window at full speed and went through it, glass catching the sleeve of her hoodie and drawing a line of heat across her forearm. She hit the wet ground on the other side and rolled and came up running along the back wall of the building toward the alley. Behind her, she heard Ghost's voice, raw, furious, calling her name. She heard the shotgun man going after her and the sound of Ghost straining against the tape. Then a click from somewhere under the office floor. Deep and mechanical. A secondary contact engaging. She ran toward where Delia had fallen, but the alley was full of light. Harlan Cole's vehicle was angled across the back lane, headlights at full. He stood under the awning with his umbrella finally open, and he was not surprised to see her. He was relieved, the specific relief of a prediction proving accurate. Good, he said. That's exactly what I needed. She stopped. Rain came down between them. The secondary trigger, Harlan said conversationally, tilting his umbrella against the wind, is keyed to distance. The farther you move from the device, the faster the second circuit charges. He paused. You just pulled the pin. Her voice cracked. You're going to kill them. I'm going to resolve a situation that should have been resolved a long time ago, he said. Your father should have stayed where we put him, and you should have stayed a number. From inside the building, the fire suppression system activated. Sprinklers slammed on across the entire structure, the emergency system converting the building into a beacon of sound and light and water. Someone inside had triggered it deliberately. Through the broken window, she could see Ghost's silhouette still at the cabinet, still holding. Harlan's umbrella adjusted. Time, he said. Two men came around the vehicle, one with a taser, one with a net gun. She turned to run, and the net hit her across the shoulders and upper back and wrapped her arms, and she went face first into wet mud, and the impact on her cheekbone was enormous and impersonal. She was dragged. She choked on mud and cold. The vehicle door opened, and she was pushed inside and it shut, and for one moment it was relatively quiet. Rain muffled by glass sirens at distance, and she lay on the back seat tangled in netting and breathed. Harlan got in the front. He turned and looked at her through the gap between the seats with the expression of a professor reviewing a student's work. You're intelligent, he said, more than your father was at your age. He paused. That's going to make this more difficult for you. She looked at him. Ghost is alive, she said. For the moment, he agreed as though this were a mild inconvenience. Where is my mother, she said. He looked at her for a long time, measuring something. Not dead, he said. Not the way you're imagining it. Somewhere she can't interfere. He glanced out the window at the building strobing red with the emergency system. Somewhere she's had time to understand the full scope of what she did. The vehicle pulled out. She tried to sit up. The netting held her. Through the rear window, she watched the building recede, lights pulsing through rain, and she thought about Ghost at the cabinet, about Delia on the concrete, about the tracker and the secondary device, and the thin magnetic contact holding everything closed. Then she saw the motorcycle. Not in the lot. On the roofline. A shape moving fast along the top of the building, dropping to a lower ledge without adjusting for the conditions, dropping again, hitting the ground running, and throwing a leg over a bike that had been left near the fence line. Brick. The engine came up hard, and the headlights swung into the alley. Harlan checked the side mirror. For the first time all night, his voice had something underneath it that wasn't quite calm. Of course, he said. The vehicle accelerated. She pressed herself against the rear seat as much as the netting allowed and watched Brick's headlight expand in the rear window. He wasn't maintaining distance. He was closing it methodically with the focus of a large man who has decided that distance is a temporary condition. The driver swerved. Brick matched it. The vehicle hit the main road, and other motorcycles appeared, iron wolves assembling from side streets and parking lots in positions they had been holding without her knowing they were holding them. The highway was wet, and the lights of the bikes through rain looked like something the weather had generated. Harlan opened the glove compartment and pressed a button. Ahead at an exit ramp, a road barrier rose from the asphalt, metal teeth lifting with the sound of machinery that had been installed specifically for this moment and had been waiting. She heard the bikes brake, heard one go down the long shriek of metal on wet pavement, and she closed her eyes for 1 second and then opened them because she needed to see. Brick did not stop. He came through the gap between the barrier supports like he had measured it from 100 yards back. He came alongside the vehicle's rear door, and she saw his helmet through the glass, and she saw his hand come up and point 2 fingers at the door seam. She understood. Harlan saw it and reached into the center console for a syringe. Enough, he said. He twisted back toward her, and the needle was very close, and then the rear window came apart not from a bullet, but from a fist and glass crossed the back seat, and a hand reached in and grabbed the door handle and wrenched it open from the outside. The door flew open into rain and speed. Kid, Brick said. His arm was under her shoulders before the word finished. He pulled her toward the open door net still tangled on her. Harlan grabbed her ankle. Brick pulled. The vehicle swerved. Harlan held for 2 more seconds, and then Brick brought the top of his helmet down on Harlan's wrist with everything he had. The syringe left Harlan's hand. Harlan made a sound she had not heard from him before. She was in Brick's arms, half in open air, Net trailing the bike's engine screaming under them, and then she was on it, draped across the tank, and the cold air hit her everywhere at once, and was the best thing she had felt all night. Brick's voice came over the engine. Rex is alive. He waited, making sure she heard it. He's hurt, but alive. We got you. She pressed her face against the bike's frame and breathed. They turned hard and she saw through rain and motion where they were heading. A fenced lot ahead with floodlights burning white against the low sky. A sign on the gate she could read even through the motion and the rain because she knew those words the way she knew her own pulse. Whitfield Youth Services. The bike skidded sideways behind a row of dumpsters at the gate perimeter. Brick killed the engine. She slid down into standing water net still tangled on her arms, and Brick was already cutting through it with a knife. Hold still, he said. She held still. The net fell away in pieces. She drew a breath that felt like the first real one in an hour. Around them, Iron Wolf's motorcycles were pulling in from the directions they had split off one by one, then several at once forming a loose arc that covered the angles. Visors down, patches visible in the floodlight. One rider removed his helmet. Rex. His face had not improved in any of the ways faces can improve over 30 minutes. One eye was beginning to close. His lip was split. He was wearing someone else's jacket. He looked at her, and something in him released something he had been holding. He put a hand on her shoulder. He showed you a feed, Rex said. On a phone. What did you see? The screen went white, she said. Rex's expression was careful. He showed you what he needed you to see. She looked at him. Ghost is alive, Rex said. Her chest broke open. She had been keeping that possibility at arm's length all the way here, not allowing herself to carry it until there was reason to carry it because she had learned the specific cost of carrying things that turn out not to be true. She let herself carry it now. She stood in the rain in front of a facility whose lights burned like something that believed it owned the night, and she let herself carry it, and the weight of it was nothing like what she had expected. It was lighter. It was its own kind of warmth. Then from the fence line, from the large drainage culvert running under the compound's foundation, a shape emerged, moving slowly, pulling itself through standing water in the shadow of the culvert. It reached the edge of the flowlight and paused and raised its head, and she saw the face she had been carrying in a torn photograph for the entirety of her life that she could remember. The face her mother had described in pieces in the dark, in the hours when there was nothing else to hold on to. The scar on the jaw. Ghost stood up. He was standing the way things stand, when standing is itself a decision being made against considerable resistance. Soaked through, wrists wrapped in tape that had gone gray. The outline of his shoulders showing a frame that had been built for more than it had been given. Rex moved toward him slowly, like approaching something that might be real and might not be. Ghost's eyes went past Rex. They went to Ren, and all of it, every hard line in him, every year of whatever had happened in the space between the photograph and this wet gravel and these floodlights, came apart at its edges. He walked toward her. He knelt in the standing water so they were level. His hands were shaking at his sides, and he did not reach for her. He held himself still in the way of someone who does not yet believe they have earned the right to reach. Ren raised her bruised wrist and held it out toward him. Ghost looked at the marks on it. His jaw contracted until the muscles stood out like cables. He swallowed. I tried, he said. The words came through something damaged to get out. I swear to you, I tried. She looked at him. I know, she said. She had been waiting to say those two words to that specific face for longer than she could fully account for, and they were smaller than she had imagined they would be, and they were also everything they needed to be. I've been waiting, she said. The floodlights burned flat and white and merciless, the kind designed to eliminate shadow rather than provide visibility, turning a facility into a stage, and everything caught inside it into something being observed. Observed and assessed and documented and filed. That was what this place had always been, a machine for turning people into documents. Iron Wolves had not stormed the gate. They had parked behind the dumpster line and the fence posts and the concrete barriers, and they had not moved. 12 men in rain gear with visors down, engines off, arranged in the patient geometry of people who understood that arriving loudly was not the same as arriving with purpose. Brick stood with his arms folded near the lead bike. Patch, the one with the composed smile, stood slightly apart from the others, his phone in his hand, doing something quiet with it that he had been doing. She now understood, since long before anyone had thought to ask him. Rex was holding the badge man's phone in a plastic bag against the rain. He had taken it from the office in the 40 seconds before Brick had pulled him out, which meant he had prioritized evidence over his own exit. That was the specific kind of decision that told you something essential about a person. Ren stood next to Ghost. She was not holding his hand. Neither of them had gotten there yet. But the space between them had weight and intention, and both of them understood it, and neither of them required it to be anything other than what it was right now. Rex opened the badge man's phone and turned it so Ghost could see the screen. Messages. A contact list built with layered aliases, the architecture of someone who had been careful for a very long time. An application with encrypted folders that had been partially opened, contents accessible in a decrypted cache, because the badge man had not anticipated losing the device and had left himself logged in. Schedules. Transfer routes. Code names in a nomenclature that used compass directions and animal designations. A ledger that was not a financial ledger in any obvious sense, but was a ledger in every functional sense. Columns of numbers corresponding to the movement of people rather than funds. Children moved between locations like line items in a supply chain. Rex turned the phone back. Ren said before anyone else could, "There are other kids in there right now." Not a question. She was looking at the gate with the expression of someone confirming what they already knew, because they had been one of the things being confirmed. Rex looked at her. Ghost looked at her. Brick across the lot turned his head. 9, Ghost said quietly. Current count. They cycle groups through. When a set gets too old or too documented, they're moved and replaced. How do you know? Rex said. Because I spent the last 6 hours inside that compound, Ghost said. I found the drainage culvert when I came through the transit tunnel under the auto shop, the same system that connects to this facility's drainage infrastructure. I wasn't the only person down there looking for a way out. Rex looked at the phone. He turned toward 2 riders on the near side. I need this to reach someone outside Harlan's chain of command, he said. Different reporting structure entirely. He looked at Patch. Patch looked up from his own phone without urgency. Already handled, Patch said with the tone of someone who had been managing several things simultaneously all night and had not found the load particularly remarkable. Rex stared at him. Since when? Rex said. Since the bar, Patch said. He tilted his phone slightly. Since you crouched down next to her and I saw what was in that photograph. Ghost looked at Patch with the specific expression of someone recalibrating a threat assessment towards something other than threat. Who are you sending it to? Ghost said. A journalist, independent. She's been building a file on Whitfield's funding chain for 8 months. She had everything except the operational layer. Patch paused. Now she has that too. The silence that followed was the kind that comes when multiple people are simultaneously deciding whether to extend trust. Ghost said, if she publishes before federal action, Harlan knows we have the phone. Harlan already knows we have the phone, Rex said. He's known everything we've done tonight since before we did it. That's been true since the auto shop. He paused. The question is whether knowing it changes what he does next. I don't think it does. Ghost was quiet for a moment. It doesn't, he said. From inside the compound, a door slammed. A light in one of the upper windows shifted someone moving fast through an interior space, and then the loudspeaker crackled back to life. Return the child immediately. The voice had shed its earlier authority. It had the quality of procedure being followed because procedure was what remained when everything else had stopped working. Rex turned away from the speaker without acknowledging it. He has to know what we have, Rex said. That changes his options. Ghost nodded. He'll try to move the physical documentation. Transfer records, paper files, the things that connect code names to real names. That's his priority now, not us. As though the word had summoned it, the compound gate began to roll open. Slowly, partially, just enough for a vehicle. A white van eased out. No markings, headlights low. Behind it, a black SUV, the particular model that Harlan favored. Brick's voice came across the lot. There. Rex raised a hand. Not yet. The van turned toward the road. Ghost watched it with the controlled patience of a man who has learned not to move fast toward things that might be bait. That's not him running, Ghost said. That's him relocating documentation. the physical evidence that connects the code names to identities. Rex looked at two riders on the far end and tilted his chin toward the van. "Shadow both vehicles," he said. "No contact, no engagement, location and eyes only." Two motorcycles eased out of the lot with lights off, moving along the service road parallel to the main gate. The van and the SUV turned east, and the bikes fell in behind them at a distance that was not distance in any practical sense. Wren was watching the gate. Rex came and stood beside her, not in front of her. Beside. "Tell me what you remember," he said, "about Whitfield, the layout, anything they did that had the quality of a system." She thought about it carefully, the way she did everything, drawing it up without letting it take over the container. "There was a blue door," she said, "at the end of the main hall, always locked. Only certain people had the card for it." She paused, and there was a phrase. They used it when children were being moved. They said it like a checklist item. Rex looked at her. "What phrase?" he said. She said it flat and operational, the way she had heard it spoken. "Reset the compass." The air around Rex went very still. He looked at Ghost. Ghost looked at the gate, and his expression did something that was not quite grief and not quite rage and was precisely located between them. "That's the transfer code," Ghost said. His voice had gone to something stripped back and fundamental. "It means a unit is being cleared. All residents moved. All records sanitized. Facility reset for the next cycle." He paused. "They took it from the tattoo, from the number. They took the thing that meant home and turned it into the language of erasure." He stopped. "They've been using it for years." Rex said nothing for a moment, then quietly, "And now we have it." A car door slammed somewhere beyond the gate. An engine turned over with the hard urgency of something being started in a hurry rather than started normally. The black SUV that had been heading east had turned around. It was coming back. "He's decided," Ghost said. Harlan Cole's voice came through the compound speaker, but it was also coming from the SUV's external speakers, now amplified and directional, aimed at where they were standing. "You cannot have the child. You cannot have Ghost. You cannot have what is inside that facility. You are trespassing on a federal installation, and every second you remain here is a documented criminal offense." The SUV accelerated toward the gate. Rex said, "Brick, take 2, force stop on the vehicle. Don't ram it. Hold it." Brick and 2 Iron Wolves hit their engines. Motorcycles and SUV converged at the gate line with the sound of engines at odds with each other and tires at odds with wetted asphalt. Rex looked at Wren. He looked at Ghost. "The tunnel," Rex said. Ghost nodded. "Old drainage system from original construction. Runs under the south wall and connects to the sub-basement. That's where they keep the residents." "Marlene," Wren said. Ghost looked at her, and whatever he had been holding arranged itself differently in his face. "Last cell," he said. "The door coded is the tattoo number." Wren was already moving. Rex caught up in 2 steps and fell in beside her, not blocking her, matching her. Ghost came up on her other side, and the 3 of them moved toward the drainage culvert along the fence line, while behind them, the compound lights blazed to full intensity, and the sound of Brick's bikes and the SUV at the gate line became a sustained negotiation of engine and momentum. The culvert opening was framed in cinder block, the steel grate that had once covered it lying in the gravel where Ghost had pushed it from inside. The smell coming out was cold concrete, standing water, and the specific staleness of space built for function and sealed for a long time. Ghost went in first. Wren followed. Rex came behind her. The tunnel was tight. Ghost moved through it with the efficiency of someone who had already been through it, knowing where the ceiling dropped, where the floor shifted, reading it by feel and by memory. Wren moved behind him and did not think about the dark or the weight of the structure above her. She thought about the blue door. She thought about the phrase on the transfer sheet she'd seen once and not understood. Number 11, status reset, compass realigned. She understood it now. The tunnel opened into a sub-basement utility space. Concrete walls gray. Fluorescent tubes overhead, 2 of 4 working, 1 flickering at the edge of its operational life. Equipment along the far wall. At the center, a corridor running south with a series of doors on the left steel, each one with a keypad mounted at handle height. The doors were blue, the specific blue she had described to Rex 40 minutes ago. Seeing them now in the physical space after having carried them only as memory was the particular strangeness of a thing that has lived only in your mind suddenly becoming real enough to touch. Ghost moved down the corridor, checking the numbers mounted above each keypad. 1, 3, 7, not sequential designations. He stopped at the last door. The number above it was 11. He looked at Ren. She stepped forward. She put her hand on the keypad and pressed 1, then pressed 1 again. A sound she had never heard from these doors, a soft mechanical release, a pressure differential shifting, and the door swung outward toward her. The room was not dark. That was the first thing. She had been imagining darkness, a single bulb or nothing, the kind of room built to diminish. But the room had a working light in the ceiling and a narrow window near the top of the wall, sealed from the outside, but passing light around its edges. And in that combined light, the room was visible in its entirety. A cot, a sealed water bottle, a small table, a bucket, and Marlene. She was at the far wall, her back to the door, her hand moving in a motion that had the rhythm of something practiced over a long period. Patient, deliberate, the motion of someone who has found the one available act and committed to it completely. Ren looked at the wall. Her name was on it, written in pencil in the handwriting she had learned to read from the letters she had first traced with her finger when she was 4 years old. Ren, over and over from the top of the wall to where the cot pushed against the baseboard, some large, some small, some careful, some hurried, but all of them the same word, her name. Repeated in the hundreds, covering every inch of that wall the way a person covers something when words are the only thing remaining to them. Marlene was adding one more. She stopped. She turned slowly the way you turn when you have heard sounds outside before that turned out to be nothing, the way you turn when you have trained yourself not to hope too quickly. She saw Ren. Her hand with the pencil went to her mouth. She did not move. She was looking at Ren the way you look at something you have not let yourself fully believe in, checking it against every version of it you have constructed, alone in the dark. Ren crossed the room. 6 steps and her mother's arms came around her, and the pencil hit the floor, and the sound Marlene made was not a word and not quite crying. It was the sound a person makes when something that has been pulled so tight for so long is finally, without warning, allowed to release all at once. Ren held on. She held with both arms and pressed her face against her mother's shoulder. And she was 10 years old, and she was also 1,000 years old, and both of those things were equally and simultaneously true. Ghost stood in the doorway. He did not come in. He stood with one hand on the steel frame and watched the two of them, and his face was the face of a man looking at something he caused to break and who cannot yet decide whether he has any right to be part of putting it back together. Marlene looked up. She saw Ghost. The sound she made then was different. It was his name, and it was an accusation, and it was grief, and underneath all of those things, it was something older than any of them. Something that had existed before the accusation had anything to accuse. Ghost came into the room. He didn't explain himself. There was nothing that could be explained in the available time. He stood 3 feet from her, and she looked at him, and he looked back, and what passed between them in that silence was the entire compressed history of a decision she had made to save their daughter, and a consequence that neither of them had fully survived, and that was going to require a great deal of time and care and honesty to navigate, and none of that time was available right now. Rex appeared in the doorway behind Ghost. "We need to move, right now." From somewhere above them, through the concrete and the floors and the building's infrastructure, Harlan Cole's voice came over the facility's internal speaker system. It had shed every remaining pretense of official language. It had the quality of a man watching his intended outcome become unavailable and improvising in real time. "You're in a federal facility. You have brought an armed criminal organization onto protected grounds. Whatever you believe you found down there, I promise you it will look very different on camera." Rex moved into the corridor. Ghost took Marlene's arm, careful, and she led him, and they followed Rex. Ren came last, and she looked back once at the wall covered in her name before the blue door swung closed behind her. They moved through the sub-basement toward the tunnel. Rex was ahead, clearing the utility space. Ghost guided Marlene through the tight crawl with the careful attention of a man relearning how to take care of something after having been prevented from it for too long. Ren moved between them. They came up through the culvert into the night air. Outside, the compound had been rearranged. Brick had forced the SUV into a sideways stop 30 feet from the gate. It sat at an angle, two motorcycles pinning its front quarter, the driver making no attempt to move. Harlan Cole was not in the vehicle. He was standing at the edge of the floodlit space. He had a laptop open. It was a deliberate posture, the posture of a presentation being given, and the laptop was oriented so its camera faced the compound taking in the scene. A small indicator light on the laptop's frame burned green. Live. Broadcasting. Rex saw it in the same moment Ren did. "He's framing the scene," Ghost said quietly. "Bikers at a federal youth facility, armed intrusion, recovered child. Whatever we do next becomes his footage." Harlan's voice came without amplification, aimed at Rex across the distance, direct. "Put it all down. On camera. Let the girl walk to me on camera, and I will personally ensure every person here tonight walks away without a charge." Rex stood with his hands at his sides. Ghost stood next to Marlene. Ren was behind them, and she was thinking. She was thinking about the things her mother had taught her. Not at a table with books, not as formal instruction. In the hours between midnight and morning, when neither of them could sleep in the spaces between survival. The compass game where Marlene would name a direction and Ren would give the opposite. The wolf game where Marlene would say a number and Ren would say the color it made her think of. The anchor game where Marlene would say a word and Ren would respond with the word that lived inside it like a key inside a lock. She had always been better at those games than her mother. Marlene had told her that was because she was smart. She understood now that Marlene had been telling her something else entirely. Something she hadn't known she was saying, something Ghost had built into the games before Marlene had understood what she was building. She stepped forward. Rex turned. "Ren, I know what he needs," she said. Ghost looked at her sharply. "The code," she said. "He can't open the evidence files. You encrypted them. But you didn't put the decryption key somewhere abstract. You built it into the games Marlene taught me. Every direction, every number, every sequence we played with." She looked at Ghost. "That's why he needed me next to you. Not as leverage, as a password." Ghost looked at her, and the expression on his face had no name she had language for. It was the face of a man realizing that the protection he had built for his daughter was the mechanism that had put her in the path of the people he was protecting her from. The specific tragedy of intelligence turned against itself. "I didn't know you'd be the key," Ghost said. The words came out badly and inadequately. "I thought the encoding was invisible. I thought—" "It doesn't matter," Ren said. She meant it completely. Not because it didn't carry weight, but because the weight was information, not instruction, and she knew the difference. She looked at Harlan Cole across the floodlit space. She walked toward him. Rex moved to stop her. Ghost caught Rex's arm. Rex looked at him. Ghost shook his head. "Let her," Ghost said. Ren walked into the floodlight until she was standing 10 feet from Harlan Cole and his open laptop. The camera indicator was green. She could see the screen's reflection in his glasses, a small image of the compound gate, the motorcycles, the wet night. She looked directly into the lens. "My name is Ren," she said. Her voice was not performing steadiness. It was simply steady the way things are steady when they have been compressed long enough that the pressure has become structural. "I am 10 years old," she said. "I lived at Whitfield Youth Services for 4 months. My number there was 11. I was not given a name. No child in that facility was given a name." Harlan Cole watched her with the expression of someone recalibrating in real time, running scenarios, trying to identify where this was heading. "The man behind me is my father," Ren continued. "His name is not Ghost. That is a name that was given to him by people who wanted to make him disappear. The man beside him is named Rex. Neither of them brought me here tonight against my will." She paused. "I came because my mother is here. Her name is Marlene. She has been held in sub-basement cell 11 since October of last year." Harlan's expression had gone very controlled. "Ren," he said, with the practiced warmth of a man deploying warmth as a precision instrument, "you've been through something very frightening tonight. These men—" "The compass game," Ren said. She was not looking at him. She was looking at the camera. She said, "South, anchor 7, wolf 11, south by southwest. Anchor 7, compass open." She was not speaking to Harlan. Behind her, Ghost's hand had moved. He had the badge man's phone taken from Rex's jacket pocket during the walk from the culvert, and his fingers moved across it with the specific speed of someone entering a sequence they designed. On the screen, a locked application pulsed once, then twice, and then opened. Folders, hundreds of them, time-stamped, named with real names rather than code designations. Photographs, audio files, transfer records, financial records with real names attached, names that carried weight in specific contexts, names that would carry weight in courtrooms and headlines, and the public record that cannot be managed or overwritten or reset at will. Ghost looked up. He looked at Patch. Patch was already holding his phone up with the camera facing the compound. "She's been connected since the Ironside bar," Patch said. "Everything." Harlan Cole closed his laptop. It was a small gesture, a reflex, the gesture of a person reaching for a tool that is no longer a tool. He stood in the rain with the closed laptop in both hands, and he looked at the camera on Patch's phone, and he looked at the phone in Ghost's hand, and he looked at Ren. For the first time in the entire length of this night, he looked like a man standing in a room he did not control. "You're a child," he said. There was nothing underneath the words. No engineering, no calibration, just a voice that had lost its architecture. Ren said, "I know." From the east, moving along the service road, 3 vehicles appeared with lights on, moving at the speed of vehicles that have a specific address and a specific warrant and are not in any hurry, because hurry is for people who aren't certain of their authority. Not the vehicles that answered to Harlan. Different federal designation. Different chain of command entirely. The journalist had made 2 calls in the time it took them to move from the culvert to this floodlit space. The second call had gone to a division that had been building its own file on an adjacent element of the same network for 11 months and had been waiting with increasing frustration for an operational thread solid enough to pull. They had their thread now. The vehicles pulled in. Men and women emerged with the unhurried coordination of people who have a warrant and no need to perform the authority it represents. Harlan did not run. He stood and held the laptop with both hands, the gesture of a man who has not yet decided between denial, negotiation, and acceptance, which meant he had already moved past 2 of those options and was working toward the third. The agent who reached him first was a woman in her 40s with the bearing of someone who grew up in rooms that underestimated her and made her peace with that early. She looked at the laptop. She looked at Harlan. "You're going to want to put that down," she said. He put it down. The handcuffs went on with the sound of something ending. Not loudly, just finally. Harlan looked at Ren as they walked him past. He stopped, not because the agent permitted it, but because he planted his feet with the stubbornness of a man who requires the last word in every room he exits. "You're just a child," he said. His voice had nothing in it. It was the voice of someone reciting a fact because facts were still something he believed he had access to. "I know," Ren said. She had said it twice now and would not need to say it again. They walked him past her. She watched him go. Then she stopped watching him because he was no longer what mattered. What mattered was the gate. It was opening, not the forced hydraulics, not the emergency mechanism. Someone inside the facility, one of the agents moving through it with the methodical efficiency of a documentation team, had found the manual release, and the gate rolled back on its track with the ordinary, untroubled sound of machinery doing what it was built to do. And then the children came out. They came in a single file, each holding the hand of the person in front or behind a chain of small people who had learned that connection was a survival mechanism and hadn't yet been given a reason to unlearn it. They came into the floodlight. Blinking stopped when they saw the bikes and the rain-soaked adults standing in the lot, and for one moment the entire night held itself around their presence. Each of them had a number on their wrist, written in marker, the kind that doesn't wash off in the ordinary passage of a day. 9 children, different ages, different faces. The same expression, the expression of people who have been told long enough that they are a designation, that they are no longer entirely certain what they are instead. Rex walked forward. He walked through the gate, and he crouched the same way he had crouched in the bar hours ago, making himself small and level. And he said something to the first child, a boy of about 12, holding the hand of a girl who couldn't have been more than 6. Whatever Rex said made the boy's grip on the girl's hand ease slightly, not from less care. From the first suggestion that care did not have to look like held breath. Ren watched. She watched iron wolves standing in the rain with engines off and no demonstration, just present, just there. She watched federal agents move carefully through a facility that was not what its sign had ever claimed. She watched Ghost standing a few feet away, with Marlene not touching, not speaking, simply existing in the same space for the first time in years that had cost both of them a great deal. She walked to Rex. She stood beside him inside the gate, and they watched the agents begin the process, names and documentation, and the slow procedural work of giving people back to themselves. An ambulance pulled into the lot. Then a second one turned in from the road. She looked at Rex. He had his phone in his hand. She could see him looking at it with an expression that was working through something. She could see him choosing to take his time, which was a choice, not a delay, and that told her something. The worst kind of news doesn't require that particular care. The worst kind just lands. Delia, she said. Rex looked up from the screen. He said, she's in surgery, University Hospital. They got to her in time. Ren absorbed it. She held it the way she had learned to hold things that could still go either way, with a grip that was not too tight, that allowed for the possibility that it would need to change shape before it was finished. She stood with it for a moment, just stood with it, which was something she had learned to do with things that mattered. Then Rex said, she's going to be furious about her window. And the specific surprise of almost laughing in this moment on this wet gravel after this night was so unexpected and so welcome that Ren had to look at the ground to keep it manageable. She looked at the hatch in the ground near the culvert. She looked at the gate of Whitfield Youth Services, open agents moving through it like something ordinary. She looked at the wall of the facility and the sign on it that had been alive for as long as it had been attached to the building. She reached into her pocket. The photograph was gone. It had been destroyed in the alley, shot out of the air by a man being paid to keep the past separated from the present. She had nothing left of it, but she knew every detail of it by memory. The woman with the exhausted eyes and the baby on her hip, the man beside her whose face had been torn away, the forearm with the compass, Rose and the wolf and the number below it, and she understood now that memory was not a lesser form of evidence. It was its own kind of record, unburnable, unterrible. It belonged to her alone and no one could shoot it out of the air. Ghost came and stood beside her. He stood at the distance he had maintained all night, the distance of someone who does not yet have the right to close it but has stopped pretending the right isn't what he wants. He was looking at the same wall she was looking at. She named you Ren, he said, because it's a small bird with a very loud voice. He paused. She said you'd need it. Ren looked at the wall. She thought about her mother writing her name in pencil on a cell wall hundreds of times, not in distress and insistence. The refusal to stop believing in the existence of a person who was somewhere in the world being told she was a number. She thought about the compass Rose burned off Ghost's arm. Not covered, removed. The shape of it still present in scar tissue, the way the shape of things stays present after the surface has changed. She thought about the games, north, south, anchor, 11. Her mother had built a key out of love and given it to her daughter to carry without knowing she was carrying anything, had built it into the architecture of childhood, the way you build something into the structure of a house before the walls go up. Invisible until you need it. There whether you know it's there or not. She thought that was either the bravest thing she had ever heard of or the most reckless thing she had ever heard of. And then she thought that those two things were very often the same thing. And the difference between them depended entirely on whether it worked. It had worked. Ghost reached into his jacket and produced something she hadn't seen him pick up. Small but barely the size of a matchbox. He opened his hand. A compass. A real one small enough for a child's palm, the needle settling north with the patient accuracy of something that doesn't care about weather or darkness or the intentions of the people around it. He held it out to her. I had this when they took me, he said. I kept it because I thought if I kept it, I'd remember which direction was real. He looked at the compass for a moment, then at her. I want you to have it, not because it'll show you where to go. You already know that. He paused. Because it keeps pointing even when everything around it is a disaster. That seemed like yours. She took it. The needle swung once and settled. She closed her hand around it and the metal was cold from the rain and from wherever he had kept it through everything. In a few minutes it would warm to her body temperature. That transition from cold to warm, from his hand to hers, was the kind of small physical truth that had a meaning she didn't need to translate. Around them the lot was full of people doing the careful and difficult work of what came next. Agents with clipboards, medical personnel with blankets, 9 children being told their names by adults who were using those names deliberately, precisely as if names were a form of medicine administered in specific doses. Rex was talking to the federal agent, the woman with composed authority, showing her the phone. She was looking at it with the expression of someone confirming what she already knew and deciding what the sequence of documentation needed to look like. Patch was nearby with his own phone still active, the journalist on the other end giving her a sequence of events in the ordered and specific language of someone who has been keeping careful notes all night. Brick was leaning against his bike with his arms crossed, eyes still moving across the perimeter, not yet convinced the threat was fully resolved. This was probably the correct call. Marlene was sitting on the back bumper of one of the federal vehicles, wrapped in a blanket. She was looking at Ghost with an expression that it was not resolved and was not going to be resolved tonight or quickly or without a great deal of work. It was the expression of a relationship with a long road in front of it and no certainty about the destination and the intention to walk it anyway. Ghost was standing near her, not next to her yet. Ren watched him. Then she walked to him and put her hand briefly on his arm, the arm where the tattoo used to be, where the outline of it remained in scar tissue, and then she walked to her mother and sat down on the bumper beside her. Marlene's arm came around her immediately, automatically, the way it had always come around her in the worst hours of the worst nights. Ren leaned into it. The rain was easing, not stopped. Easing, the way Pennsylvania rain eases in November gradually and without announcement, as though it has spent what it needed to spend and is withdrawing without ceremony. Rex came and stood a few feet away. He did not insert himself into the circle. He stood at its edge, the way he had stood at the edge of everything all night present, protective, requiring nothing from anyone. Ren looked at him. "Thank you," she said. He looked at her with his pale eyes and his long white beard and the full sleeve of tattoos that had started this entire night, and he said nothing. But something shifted in his face in the way of someone receiving something unexpected and uncertain whether they've earned it. Then he nodded once. That was enough. The last of the 9 children came through the gate, and the gate rolled shut behind him. The compound lights, burning at full intensity all night, dropped suddenly to maintenance level as someone inside found the override. In the reduced light, the compound looked smaller and less significant, which was accurate. It had always been smaller than it presented itself as being. That was the mechanism of things like this. They made themselves appear larger than they were and made the people they wanted to control appear smaller than they were. The numbers instead of names, the transfer codes, the floodlights and loudspeakers and official language. All of it in service of making certain people believe the size differential was permanent. Ren closed her hand tighter around the compass and felt the needle pressing lightly against her palm. She thought about north not as a metaphor, not as a moral direction, but as a direction. Simply that, reliable, consistent, pointing at something true, regardless of who was holding the instrument or what they had been through to get to this moment. 6 weeks later, Iron Wolves Auto in tow, a Tuesday in January, cold in the honest Pennsylvania way, not cruel about it, not performing, just factual. The kind of cold that has been part of this particular corner of the world for a long time and makes no apology. The south-facing bay doors were open, and the smell coming out was coffee and exhaust, and Delia's particular brand of industrial cleaner, which she applied to all surfaces with an enthusiasm that suggested she considered cleanliness a form of argument she intended to win. She moved with a slight pull on her left side. She did not discuss it when it was raised. She had returned to work 11 days after the surgery, 2 weeks before the doctor had suggested, and Rex had said nothing about it because there was nothing productive to say, and she had resumed running the place with the focus of someone who had a backlog and intended to address it. The office window had been replaced. New glass, clear and well sealed, slightly better than the original in every measurable way. Ren was at the counter, homework spread across it in the arrangement of someone who was technically doing homework while also doing several other things. A glass of orange juice. A library book face down at the far edge with its spine carefully uncreased. Juniper on the floor under her feet, one ear bent at its permanent angle, breathing in the deep and total way of a dog that has decided she is exactly where she is supposed to be. Ghost was in the back of the shop. He was working on a carburetor from a 1987 truck someone had brought in the previous week. He worked slowly, not from inefficiency, but because he was relearning the pace of things that were not emergencies, the pace of ordinary work, the pace of a Tuesday. He had been relearning it for 6 weeks, and some days it came more naturally than others, and he did not pretend otherwise, which was something. Marlene was on the phone in the small office, legal pad in front of her, making notes in the small and careful handwriting she used when she was building a case. She was talking to a lawyer who works specifically on civil rights cases involving the foster care system, a lawyer who had called her not the other way around after the Whitfield story had run. She had been on the phone with him or his colleagues most weekday mornings for 3 weeks running. Rex came in from outside, jacket wet across the shoulders from the cold air. He set a mug of coffee on the counter next to Ren's homework, without stopping, without preamble, without any ceremony at all. The way you place something when the placing itself is the entire communication. Ren looked at the mug. She looked at her homework. "The third problem is wrong," she said. Rex stopped. He turned back and looked at the page. He was not a man who performed reluctance convincingly, but he performed it briefly, which she had come to understand was his particular expression of a sense of humor. He pulled the stool from behind the counter and sat down across from her. He looked at the problem. A fraction division problem, formatted by someone who believed that making something look complicated was the same as making it instructive. "Show me what you did," he said. She showed him. He looked at the way she had set it up, the reasoning which was correct, the execution which was where it had slipped. He reached for a pencil. They worked through it together in the morning quiet of the shop. Juniper breathing under the counter. Ghost tools making their small sounds in the bay. Marlene's voice rising and falling in the office, precise and committed, building something she intended to finish. On the counter between them, beside the homework and the coffee mug, the small compass sat. The needle pointed north, the way it always did, the way it would.